Secession and being ahead on things. Part 2. So, because the right was so ahead on things that we foresaw, and it was that we were willing to accept, maybe it won't be like Star Trek, it won't be like Star Wars. It'll be more like something like, and then Cyberpunk 2020, the tabletop RPG, came out. And a lot of us in the 80s, we were heavily influenced by Mike Pondsmith's game. And then looking into the lore around all that, and that a lot of these people were foreseeing things from, looking at the present, knowing about the past, that wrote about a future that was quite plausible. And it sort of became this thing of to work against such a future. And it seemed that at a certain point, like really with the advent of a lot of social media, it really became this kind of thing like, oh man, we're not going to have the dark future that we thought. People are sharing all kinds of music, bands are finding, the very idea of people finding then these sort of online communities, that people that they would have never would have met in real life. They could have never all kind of hung out in a way. That for a lot of us who are Gen X, we're like, this is it. This is fantastic. This is, you have more friends. I mean, really, like that idea. You have more friends who you would have never been able to make friends with. And it had its, of course, its downsides because people could just be mean on the internet. But a lot of us weren't that sensitive to it. As is noted by especially the popularity of Jim Medicare. It's like we just weren't very sensitive to having somebody give us the business online. If you said something odd, or you're in something a little odd, you just kind of accepted that. And so I think that's also why then, like, the red pill world is something that we associate. There's a group of, like, kind of Gen Xers that, you kind of associate, like Rollo Tomasi or something like that. He's not a boomer. He's an Xer. He's an early Xer. Clary. Turd-flinging Monkey, from what I know, is a late Xer, possibly an early millennial. But that it's something that, you find heavily associated with that, where it's like, well, so they gave you the business online. Do you know the person? Have you ever seen them? Why do you care? Like that mentality, so, but younger generations it was a different sensibility about such behavior. And yeah, so we were able to foresee something that is also a big deal that I failed to bring up, is that there is now record purchases of physical delivery, and so some of this, what it is it's kind of future, like it's like that which is supposed to be coming out of the ground at some point relatively soon, and that is the kind of gold that they're counting on, but basically that and that there is a certain portion that would be actual, like, delivered industrial, probably gold or bullion. I think I would have to look up bullion delivery as opposed to quote unquote gold purchases. So contracts filed for so much future ore, or future material and not ore. But you know what I mean. But then there's, and no matter what, it's that there's record buying of bullion, of both gold among civilians, among it's gold and silver, and that the big thing is people are willing to bet what would be relatively high prices in gold compared to the dollar, relatively high price in gold. They're betting that no, that the dollar's going to get less valuable and gold's going to get more value. That people who, yeah. So, and countries are. Whole nations are doing this. Central banks are willing to do this. They're willing to take that risk at this stage. At, I think, 1960, if I remember correctly today. Today being the 19th of November. So, the right wing was ahead on this, such that even like people like Sam Cedar would be teasing. Like, that's one of those things when you're like, wait, Sam what? Sam Cedar. He's laughing, he's chuckling about you wanting gold. What was his name again? Cedar. Sam Cedar. No, just, that's kind of odd, you know. And so, but now we called it. We were ahead by a decade, and now major central banks are grabbing a material that, you know, it was our shows they were advertising on. So it's this kind of thing now of like, once somebody bets so well, once somebody's so far ahead by a whole decade on subjects, that people, major banks and major financial institutions are like, yeah, so they were right about that, and we're running out of humans. And, you know, I mean, go with, at a certain point, when are people going to figure out your ideas are make-believe? You're basing your thinking on make-believe. So much so that, like, Fried Chicken Man can guess the outcomes of major international incidences before think tanks in Washington, D.C. Like, holy shit. I mean, that's not tax money being well spent anymore. That's not donations to major big brain institutions. You're not getting your most for your money at that stage. I mean, it's pretty bad, you know, that it's like that us randos on the right, on the internet, will have talks that, I mean, you just couldn't have this on PBS. There's no C-SPAN that could handle the danger of what's of the depth, you know, of discussing, Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the Azeris, and all that. And I mean, the Rosicrucian movement relationship to the Enlightenment and what it was politically about, with conversions of, you know, and royal families intermarrying and this, that, and the other. And so we're where it's at now. We are where the boys are. And the societal separation that now it's being openly argued, there needs to be that these two groups of people, a portion of them really, really, really cannot be around the other portion at all. And, you know, they'll explode into violence if they know they are around, you know, this other group. And at some stage, this isn't, I mean, you're just not going to be able to have, like, even the most fundamental levels of government can't handle that kind of relationship in society. And then also there comes the whole thing of the left will, it doesn't matter what anybody wants to pretend, because they live in a fantasy world. They will always be this group who just terrorizes people. It won't ever be that they have some popular group that, that shows up to guard people against the unsafety and this, that, and the other. No, unless there is some honest approach of, no, what the poll numbers are starting to say about the way people think about one another nowadays, we're going to have to be honest about, you got to let these people have their own space at some point, because they don't want their money, they don't want their power to be shared by people like you. And so and it's got to be frank. Like Oregon is one of these places where it's hopefully the conversation is getting real damn frank, because it's until people are real damn frank about it, and there's candor, there's not, and so there won't be some, oh well, that people will understand the forces of anti-racism. No, you guys will just destroy things. You guys will just show up. The local cops will be told by the mayor who's on your side, don't do anything, and you'll just destroy things. So this is why, again, at a national level, the police have to start taking a stand. The police have to, law enforcement has to start being like, no, this is, you can't do these things. You can't wear masks at protests. You can't just bump into people and say that you're peacefully protesting in their direction, and think that you can't touch people at a protest. That's not a protest. That's not what that is. Like, law enforcement's going to have to do this at a national level, have certain statements that they make at the fraternal order level, or else this is going to just come apart at the seams in ways that nobody in the United States really has ever seen, unless they've been in the Middle East in war. That's unfortunately, and because they're going to start seeing that kind of behavior pop up more and more and more among especially this group that calls themselves the educated class, because that's where that stuff comes from. It over and over and over again. That's really where terrorism comes from. It doesn't come from the desperate poor. It comes from relatively educated people who think that they have some really, really good reason to do terrible things to other people. So, and that's my call. And like so many other things, I'm basing it on what other people's work. Okay. That's some new thing. Interesting. Somebody's trying to big up apparently there's some new crew tagging up the area. And it's just very interesting. They're has some very, very specific way they're doing it. And I'm like, wait a second. There's certain things when you see it done more than once, you see the pattern, you're like, we'll see. We'll see if this keeps showing up someplace. Start seeing the telltale signs of losers draped in blue that looking like the most addicted of all addicts that have ever been addicted. Ultra crackheads. That's our crew. And so and also I had this kind of idea. I wanted to lobby Tim Pool on this because he knows Tim Armstrong. And because Tim Pool knows Tim Armstrong, they've hung out. It wouldn't hurt for Tim to kind of get some of the old punks together and just have like a show where they just talk about like imagine Jello Biafra's take on everything. Like he literally has sung songs about. He's got to have these insights on stuff now. There's just like, what is going through your mind as you see this, Jello? Like, agnostic front, it would be kind of interesting to actually have a little history session with old punks and like the Agrolites, like Tim Armstrong, the Agrolites, some of those guys like Boom Boom or Jesse, if I remember their names, and then guys from like old, like the Descendants, they're still around, like, and just talk about, like, give people a little sense of the history of like that whole scene, because most people know about it from Hot Topic. It wasn't the word of mouth thing that you learned about kind of like these cool bands, and so I don't know. I was just thinking about that. It's something I have no way of getting in touch with Tim Pool about it. So people should be like, interview old punks, Tim. Come on. Old punks, really old punks. Come on. You're still alive. Come on. Come on, Tim. Come on. So, because I'm sure he knows a lot of them. I'm sure if he were to even put out there just a handful of bands, they would be in touch with them. Like somebody was saying Fugazi. That'd be great for him to have an interview, but it would be like you need a few, like 3 bands there. You need like members from 2 to 4 bands, so that they could all just talk about some of the old times, some of the animosities that existed. Most people, even millennials, they never heard of FSU. They didn't know that there was such a crew that existed. Like they didn't know that like they think Antifa, and for a lot of punk rockers, they're like, no, that's like FSU. But, nobody knew about them. You had to know about that, and even I caught on to it late, and had heard of it. But I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. Or Riot Girls, that's something that kind of comes into existence in like public knowledge, but then it fades again because nobody really remembers it, and it's like, it'd be kind of neat to bring up like some of these, or the way that, the stuff that punks used to wear, or like old photos, like that would be a gas, because especially fucking Jello has like all kinds of old photos, and all kinds of old memories. That would be really interesting. I always wonder like his take on like performing, like him getting along so well with the Foreskins. Like that's when I'm like, when I saw that performance, I was like, okay, all right. Like that's that story. That's what somebody needs to get that interview, But and then boy, his take on what's happening. Oh my gosh, he called it all. All right, later.